Before we dive into one of the most dramatic military failures in human history, I need something from you. If this video teaches you something new, if it makes you see the Mongol Empire differently, hit that like button, drop a comment. Share this with someone who thinks the Mongols were invincible. That's all I'm asking. No fluff, no filler, just the story of how nature itself conspired to stop the greatest empire the world had ever seen. Let me ask you something. What happens when the most successful military machine in history, an empire that conquered everything from Korea to Hungary, sets its sights on a small island nation? You'd think the outcome would be obvious. The Mongols had crushed the Jin dynasty, obliterated the Khwarezmian Empire, shattered the armies of Eastern Europe. They didn't lose, they didn't retreat, they rolled over civilizations like a force of nature. But Japan was different. This is the story of two invasions, two typhoons, and the moment the Mongol Empire learned that some conquests are beyond even their reach. This is about samurai fighting on beaches, wooden ships splintering in impossible seas, and storms so violent that they changed the course of world history. The Japanese called these storms Kamikaze, the divine wind, because when human effort failed, the gods themselves intervened. Or so the story goes. Let's go back 750 years and see what actually happened. The year is 1260. Kublai Khan has just become the great Khan of the Mongol Empire. He's not like his grandfather Genghis. He's more sophisticated, more interested in administration than pure conquest. But make no mistake, he's still a conqueror. He's already absorbed most of northern China. Korea has bent the knee after decades of brutal resistance. The entire Asian mainland from the Pacific to the Black Sea answers to Mongol authority. Kublai looks at the map. There's one place that doesn't acknowledge his supremacy, one place that has never been touched by Mongol power. Japan. It's not about resources. Japan doesn't have vast gold mines or critical trade routes. It's not even about strategy. Japan is isolated, not threatening anyone. It's about something more fundamental to the Mongol worldview: submission. Every empire that matters has acknowledged Mongol supremacy. Every king, every Khan, every emperor has either bent the knee or been destroyed. The Japanese haven't even responded. That's unacceptable. In 1266, Kublai sends his first diplomatic mission to Japan. The message is simple: acknowledge the great Khan as your superior, establish diplomatic relations, send tribute, or face the consequences. It's not really a negotiation. It's a command wrapped in diplomatic language, the kind of command that has worked everywhere from Baghdad to Kiev. The Japanese response: silence, not defiance. Not negotiation, just silence. The letter reaches the Japanese court in Kyoto. It's read, it's discussed, and then nothing. No envoy is sent back, no response is written. The Mongol ambassadors wait and wait. Eventually, they return to Korea empty-handed. Kublai tries again in 1268. Another mission, another letter. This one is more explicit about the consequences of refusal. The Mongol envoys arrive in Kyushu, the southernmost of Japan's main islands. They present their demands to the local officials, who forward them to Kyoto, where the imperial court resides. Now here's what you need to know about Japan in 1268. It's politically fragmented. The emperor exists, but he's a figurehead. Real power rests with the Kamakura shogunate, the military government established by Minamoto no Yoritomo back in 1192. The shogun is the military dictator. But even the shogun is not absolute. Behind him stands the Hojo clan, who serve as regents and hold actual power. The man making decisions is Hojo Tokimune. He's only 18 years old in 1268, but he's the shikken, the regent, and this Mongol letter lands on his desk. The Japanese leadership is divided. The emperor and his courtiers urge caution. The Mongols are distant. Perhaps if Japan sends token tribute, maintains nominal relations, the threat will pass. They've heard stories about what happened to kingdoms that refused Mongol demands. Cities burned, populations massacred, entire dynasties erased. But the military class, the samurai, see it differently. Japan has never bowed to foreign powers. The samurai code, Bushido, values honor above survival. Submitting to barbarian demands is unthinkable. They'd rather fight and die than live under foreign domination. Hojo Tokimune listens to both sides. He's young, but he's not stupid. He knows the Mongols are dangerous. He also knows that bending the knee to them would destroy his authority. The samurai class would see it as cowardice. His own legitimacy depends on projecting strength. He makes his decision: ignore them. The Mongol envoys return to Kublai empty-handed. Again. Kublai is patient. He's fighting a war against the Song dynasty in southern China. That's his priority. But Japan's refusal gnaws at him. In 1271, he sends another mission. Same message, same silence. Then in 1272, another mission. This time, the Japanese response is different. Some of the Mongol envoys are arrested, imprisoned, humiliated. They eventually return to Korea, but the message is clear: Japan is not interested in dialogue. Kublai's patience runs out. In 1273, he sends what will be his final diplomatic mission. The envoys carry an ultimatum: submit or be invaded. The letter is explicit about what will happen if Japan refuses. The Mongol military machine will descend on the islands. There will be no mercy. This time, Hojo Tokimune doesn't ignore the message. He has the Mongol envoys brought to Kamakura, the shogunate capital, and then he has them executed. Beheaded, their heads displayed as a message to any other foreign power that thinks Japan can be intimidated. That's it. That's the line. When news reaches Kublai, his response is immediate: prepare for invasion. But this isn't like invading Korea or northern China. The Mongols are horse warriors. Masters of the steppe. They've conquered vast territories by moving faster than their enemies, by using mobility and archery to devastating effect. But Japan is an island, separated from the mainland by over 100 miles of open water, the Tsushima Strait. The Mongols will need ships, lots of ships, and sailors who know how to use them. Kublai turns to his newly conquered subjects, the Koreans. Korea has been under Mongol control since 1259, after decades of resistance. The Koreans fought hard, but eventually they submitted. Now they're being asked to provide the means for another conquest. They have shipbuilding expertise, they have ports, they have experienced sailors, and they have no choice. The Koreans are ordered to construct a fleet, not a small fleet, hundreds of ships, supply vessels, troop transports, warships. They're also required to provide thousands of soldiers to serve in the invasion force. The Mongol military tradition is to incorporate conquered peoples into their armies. It's efficient, it spreads the burden, and it means conquered peoples help conquer others, cementing their submission. The Korean king, Wonjong, has no choice but to comply, but he's not happy about it. Korea has just emerged from decades of war. The population is exhausted, resources are depleted, and now they're being forced to build an invasion fleet to attack a neighbor who never threatened them. The shipbuilding begins in 1273. Korean shipyards along the southern coast are mobilized. Forests are cleared for timber. Entire villages are conscripted for labor. The work is brutal. Thousands of trees are felled, shaped, assembled into hulls. Sails are woven. Supplies are gathered: rice, weapons, water barrels, horses. By late 1274, the fleet is ready, 900 ships. It's an impressive sight, the largest invasion fleet assembled in East Asian waters up to that point. The invasion force consists of roughly 23,000 troops, about 15,000 Mongol and Chinese soldiers, 8,000 Korean soldiers, and another 7,000 Korean sailors to crew the ships. It's not the largest army the Mongols have ever fielded, but it should be more than enough to overwhelm Japanese defenses. The command structure is mixed. The overall commander is a Mongol general, but Korean officers lead the Korean contingents. Chinese officers lead the Chinese troops. It's the standard Mongol approach: use local expertise, but keep ultimate authority in Mongol hands. The plan is straightforward: land on Kyushu, establish a beachhead, overwhelm the local defenders, force the Japanese to submit. If they resist, burn their cities and kill their leaders until they understand submission is the only option. It's worked everywhere else. Why would Japan be different? The fleet departs from Korean ports in October 1274. The timing is deliberate, late enough in the year that the campaign season in China is winding down, early enough that winter storms haven't started. Or so they think. First stop, Tsushima Island, roughly halfway between Korea and Kyushu. It's small, maybe 270 square miles, mostly mountainous. The population is sparse. But it's strategically important. Controlling Tsushima means controlling the strait. Tsushima is governed by the So clan. The island's garrison consists of maybe 80 mounted samurai and a few hundred foot soldiers. When lookouts spot the Mongol fleet on the horizon, hundreds of ships, sails blotting out the ocean, they know immediately this is not a battle they can win. The local governor, So Sukekuni, has a choice. He can surrender and hope for mercy, or he can fight and die with honor. For a samurai, it's not really a choice. Sukekuni sends a messenger to the mainland warning of the invasion. Then he gathers his men and prepares to resist. Every samurai on the island, maybe 80 warriors total, assembles at the main settlement. They know they're going to die. But they're going to make the Mongols pay for every inch of their island. The Mongol fleet anchors offshore, landing craft row toward the beaches. Thousands of soldiers prepare to disembark. Sukekuni watches them come. Then he gives the order, charge. 80 samurai on horseback gallop toward the beach. It's a magnificent sight. Their warriors in full armor, Dumaru lamella armor, helmets, swords, bows. They've trained their entire lives for combat. Each one is worth 10 ordinary soldiers in single combat. But the Mongols don't fight single combat. The Mongol troops landing on the beach are a mix of cavalry and infantry. The infantry form up quickly, shields in front, spears and polearms bristling. Behind them, archers nock arrows. Mongol composite bows have a longer range than Japanese bows. They're made from wood, horn and sinew, laminated together. They're recurved, which stores more energy. A Mongol archer can hit a target at 300 yards. A Japanese archer is effective at maybe 150. The samurai charge into range. The Mongol archers open fire. Arrows fall like rain, not individual shots aimed at individual targets. Volley fire, coordinated. Dozens of arrows falling on the same spot simultaneously. Samurai fall from their horses, others press forward. They close the distance. They're fast. But the Mongols have something else the Japanese have never seen: explosive projectiles. The Tetsuhao, literally iron bomb, is an early grenade. It's a ceramic or iron shell packed with gunpowder. A fuse is lit. The bomb is thrown or launched. When it detonates, it creates a massive noise, smoke, and shrapnel. It doesn't kill many people directly. The explosive force is weak compared to modern grenades, but it terrifies horses. It disorients soldiers, and it marks targets for Mongol infantry. The samurai charge hits the Tetsuhao bombardment. Horses panic. Riders are thrown. The charge breaks apart. Mongol infantry rush forward. They don't wait for individual challenges. They swarm isolated samurai, 3 or 4 soldiers attacking one warrior. Spears from multiple angles. No honor, no ceremony, just killing. So Sukekuni fights to the end. Chronicles record that he killed dozens of enemies before he fell. But he falls. All of his men fall. Tsushima is overrun in a single day. The Mongols don't just kill the garrison. They go through the entire island. Villages are burned. Civilians are killed or enslaved. Women are tied to the sides of ships. A deliberate humiliation, a terror tactic. The message is clear. This is what resistance looks like. Submit or die. Next stop, Iki Island, about 40 miles south of Tsushima, closer to Kyushu. Iki is slightly larger, slightly more populated. The garrison is led by Taira Kagetaka, another local governor with maybe 100 samurai under his command. Kagetaka has heard what happened at Tsushima. He knows the Mongols are coming. He orders the women and children to evacuate inland. Then he prepares his defenses. When the Mongol fleet arrives, he's ready. The battle follows the same pattern. The samurai fight bravely. They launch desperate charges. They inflict casualties. But they're overwhelmed by numbers, by tactics, by technology they don't understand. Kagetaka's wife, Princess Seo, sees the defenses crumbling. She knows what's coming. Rather than face capture, she gathers the women who couldn't evacuate, over 200 women and children. She leads them to a cliff overlooking the sea, and then she leads a mass suicide. They jump together. Ikki falls. The Mongols enslave the survivors. The fleet moves on. By early November 1274, the invasion fleet reaches Hakata Bay on Kyushu's northern coast. Hakata is a major port city, one of the most important trading centers in western Japan. The bay provides a natural harbor. If the Mongols can establish a base here, they can bring in reinforcements, build supply lines, stage operations deeper into Japan. From Hakata, they can march inland toward Kyoto and force the entire country to submit. The Japanese are ready, sort of. Word of Tsushima's fall reached Kyushu weeks earlier. Hojo Tokimune issued emergency orders. Every samurai in Kyushu must prepare to resist. Coastal defenses must be strengthened. Supplies must be stockpiled. The Mongols must not gain a foothold on the main islands, but prepared is relative. The Japanese have no unified command structure, no centralized military strategy. Kyushu is controlled by various samurai clans, the Shoni, the Otomo, the Kikuchi, dozens of smaller houses. Each controls their own territory, each commands their own retainers. Some are ready to fight, others are still mobilizing. There's no time for proper coordination. When the Mongol fleet appears in Hakata Bay on November 19, the local samurai ride to meet them. Thousands of mounted warriors in full armor, carrying swords and bows, banners flying, horns sounding. It's an impressive sight, a traditional samurai army ready to defend their homeland. It's also completely unprepared for what's about to hit them. The Mongols begin landing operations, troops pour onto the beaches, infantry form defensive perimeters, archers provide cover, cavalry units disembark and form up. The organization is impressive. These are professional soldiers executing a well-rehearsed plan. The Japanese charge. This is how samurai fight. You announce yourself, you declare your lineage, you challenge a worthy opponent, you engage in single combat. Victory brings honor, death in battle brings glory. The Mongols don't care about honor. The samurai charge hits the Mongol line, and the Mongols fight as a unit. Infantry in front with large shields, bigger than anything the Japanese use. Spears and polearms form a bristling wall. Behind them, archers fire over the shields, volley after volley, not aimed shots, area saturation. If 50 arrows land in a 10-yard square, someone's getting hit. And then the explosions start. Tetsuhou bombs arc through the air. They land among the charging samurai. The detonations are loud, louder than anything on a medieval battlefield. Smoke, fire, shrapnel, horses bolt, formations scatter. Japanese accounts describe the terror of these weapons. One samurai chronicle, the Moko Shurei Ekatoba, a pictorial scroll depicting the invasions, shows warriors and horses fleeing in panic as explosions rip through their ranks. The artist draws the bombs as spherical objects trailing smoke, detonating with stylized clouds. The text describes the sound as like thunder and says the warriors had never experienced anything like it. The samurai are brave. Individually, they're superb warriors, but bravery is not enough. The Mongols fight differently. They don't seek individual glory, they seek victory. If that means 3 men ganging up on one samurai, that's what happens. If that means using explosives to break cavalry charges, that's what they do. If that means targeting officers and cutting off command, they do it without hesitation. The Japanese are pushed back from the beaches. The Mongols establish a landing zone. They begin fortifying their positions, digging trenches, building palisades. They're setting up for a longer campaign. This is going according to plan. One samurai, Takezaki Tsunaga, later commissioned the Moko Shurei Ekatoba scroll to document his own actions during the battle. In the scroll, Tsunaga is shown charging the Mongol forces nearly alone, his horse struck by arrows, explosions going off around him. He's wounded but survives. The scroll depicts him seeking recognition from the shogunate for his bravery, because without official recognition, his valor means nothing. It's a fascinating glimpse into samurai psychology. They fought desperately, but they also needed their lords to witness and acknowledge their courage. The fighting continues all day. The Japanese launch multiple counterattacks. They're trying to drive the Mongols back into the sea. They inflict casualties. The Mongols aren't invincible, and samurai in close combat are dangerous. But every charge is broken up by arrows and explosives. Every Japanese advantage in individual skill is negated by Mongol numerical superiority and coordinated tactics. As evening approaches, both sides are exhausted. The Japanese have lost hundreds of men. The Mongols have lost fewer, but they're far from home, operating in hostile territory. The Japanese pull back to defensive positions inland. The Mongols hold the beachhead but haven't pushed further. The Mongol commanders gather on the flagship to discuss strategy. They've landed successfully. They've defeated the initial Japanese response, but they haven't broken through. The Japanese are still organized, still fighting. Tomorrow they'll try to push inland, establish a perimeter, begin the real campaign. But as night falls on November 19, the weather changes. The wind picks up. The sea, which has been relatively calm, begins to churn. Waves grow higher. The ships anchored in Hakata Bay start to rock violently. The Mongol fleet is vulnerable. Hakata Bay is wide open to the northwest, the direction from which the wind is now blowing. The anchorage is exposed. If a real storm rolls in, the fleet could be in serious trouble. Ships could drag anchor. They could collide with each other. They could be driven onto rocks or the shore. The commanders face a decision. They can keep troops on land, consolidate the beachhead, and hope the storm passes. Or they can pull everyone back to the ships, ride out the storm at sea, and resume operations when conditions improve. They make what seems like a reasonable call: retreat to the ships. It's safer to keep the army together, under command, ready to land again once the weather clears. Leaving troops ashore in a storm means they'd be cut off, vulnerable to Japanese counterattack, unable to coordinate with the fleet. Orders are given. The Mongol soldiers abandon their beachhead positions. They return to the landing craft. They row back to the main fleet. By nightfall, almost all the invasion force is back aboard the ships. That night, the storm hits. It's not a typhoon, not a full-scale kamikaze, but it's a significant storm. The wind reaches gale force. Waves batter the fleet. The ships, packed with soldiers and horses and supplies, are unwieldy. Many are Korean-built transports, good for cargo, less good for rough seas. They don't handle the conditions well. Anchors drag, ships drift. In the darkness and confusion, vessels collide, hulls crack. Some smaller ships capsize outright. Soldiers below deck, trying to sleep, suddenly find themselves in water as their ship takes on flooding. They're trapped. They drown in the holds as the ships go down. The storm rages all night. Captains fight to keep their vessels under control. Some cut anchor and try to maneuver in the darkness. Others ride it out, hoping their anchors hold. The chaos is absolute. By morning, the fleet is a disaster. Hundreds of ships are damaged. Some are sunk entirely. Thousands of soldiers are dead, drowned, crushed, killed when their ships broke apart. Horses have been lost. Supplies have been washed overboard or ruined by seawater. The invasion force is in no condition to continue operations. The Mongol commanders assess the situation. They can try to regroup, repair what they can, and launch another assault. But the damage is severe. Morale is shattered. The Japanese are still out there waiting, and if another storm hits, they make the call: retreat. This invasion is over. The fleet limps back to Korea, leaving the dead behind, abandoning equipment, fleeing before another storm can finish what this one started. The Japanese, watching from shore, can barely believe it. They'd been losing the battle. The Mongols had superior tactics, superior coordination, superior technology. The samurai had fought with everything they had, and it wasn't enough. The Mongols had established a beachhead. They were going to push inland. Japan was going to fall, and then the storm came, and the enemy left. The only explanation that makes sense, the only explanation that fits the Japanese worldview, is divine intervention. The gods, the kami, sent the wind to protect Japan. The storm wasn't random. It was a message. Japan is sacred. Japan is protected. Foreign invaders will not succeed here. The term kamikaze doesn't come into popular use until later, but the concept is born here. The divine wind that protects Japan from foreign invasion becomes a foundational myth of Japanese national identity. But in Kublai Khan's court in China, there's no talk of divine intervention. There's only talk of failure. The invasion was supposed to be straightforward. Land, overwhelm the defenders, force submission. Instead, the Mongols retreated after barely establishing a beachhead. Ships were lost, men were lost, and Japan remains defiant. Kublai is furious, but he's also pragmatic. The 1274 invasion was a probe. Now he knows what he's facing. He knows the Japanese will fight. He knows the waters are dangerous. He knows what's needed: a bigger fleet, more soldiers, better preparation, overwhelming force. He orders a second invasion. This time there will be no mistakes. This time Japan will fall. Over the next 7 years, preparations intensify. Kublai is busy with other matters. The final conquest of the Song dynasty in southern China takes until 1279. But even as he's fighting that war, he's building the fleet for Japan. He demands more ships from Korea. The Koreans, already exhausted from the first invasion, are pushed to their limits. Shipyards work constantly. Forests are cleared for timber. Entire coastal regions are mobilized to feed the war machine. But it's not just Korea. After the Song dynasty falls, Kublai has access to southern Chinese shipyards, southern Chinese timber, southern Chinese manpower. The Song had a powerful navy. Now that navy belongs to the Mongols. Kublai orders the construction of a second fleet, even larger than the Korean one. The Japanese, meanwhile, know the Mongols will return. It's not a question of if. It's when. Hojo Tokumun spends those 7 years preparing. He orders the construction of defensive walls along Hakata Bay, stone barriers to prevent easy beach landings. Samurai clans are reorganized. Coastal defenses are strengthened. Watchtowers are built on outlying islands. Kyushu becomes an armed camp. The defensive wall at Hakata is a massive undertaking. It's built by conscripted labor, farmers, peasants, anyone who can lift a stone. The wall runs for miles along the coast. It's not a continuous fortification. It's more like a series of stone barriers protecting the most likely landing sites. But it's substantial. In places, it's 10 feet high and several feet thick. Behind it, defending samurai can shoot arrows down at attackers trying to land. It changes the calculus of invasion. The Mongols can't just charge onto the beach anymore. The samurai themselves learn from the first invasion. They realize their traditional methods don't work against Mongol tactics. Individual challenges mean nothing when the enemy fights in coordinated units, so they adapt. They practice fighting in groups. They develop new tactics for dealing with massed archery. They prepare incendiary weapons to use against ships. They train for night raids. And still, Kublai sends diplomatic missions. Even as he builds his massive invasion fleet, he offers Japan one more chance to submit peacefully. It's not mercy, it's practicality. If Japan bends the knee without a fight, he can deploy those resources elsewhere. But he's not optimistic. In 1279, another Mongol envoy arrives in Japan. He carries a letter from Kublai. The message is the same as always: submit, acknowledge Mongol supremacy, send tribute. Join the empire peacefully. Hojo Tokumun's response is unequivocal. He has the Mongol envoys arrested. Then he has them executed, all of them. The heads are displayed publicly in Kamakura. It's a message: there will be no submission. There will be no negotiation. Come and try to take us. When Kublai receives this news, he knows there's no diplomatic solution. It will be war, total war. The invasion preparations accelerate. By 1281, the invasion force is ready. This time, it's not 23,000 troops. It's 140,000. Two separate fleets. The Eastern Army, launching from Korea, 900 ships carrying 40,000 Mongol, Chinese, and Korean soldiers, plus thousands of sailors. The Southern Army, launching from southern China, 500 ships carrying 100,000 former Song Chinese soldiers, now conscripted into Mongol service. Think about that for a moment. 4,400 ships, 140,000 soldiers. It's the largest seaborne invasion in history up to that point, larger than anything attempted in Europe, larger than any previous Mongol operation. Kublai is betting everything on this. He's throwing the full weight of his empire, resources from Korea, northern China, southern China, at one island nation. The plan is for both fleets to converge on Kyushu and land simultaneously at multiple points. The Eastern Army will hit Hakata again. The Southern Army will land elsewhere on Kyushu. Together, they'll overwhelm the defenses, establish permanent bases, and begin the systematic conquest of Japan. With 140,000 men, they can garrison multiple cities, supply themselves from the land, and grind down Japanese resistance through sheer numbers. The Korean fleet, the Eastern Army, departs first in May 1281. They have the shorter distance to travel, so they leave early. The plan is for the Southern Army to leave later and both fleets to arrive at roughly the same time in early June. Coordination is critical. If one fleet arrives too early, it'll have to fight alone, like in 1274. This time, the timing has to be perfect. The Eastern Army retraces the 1274 route. They land on Tsushima in late May. This time, there's almost no resistance. Tsushima was devastated in 1274. The population has barely recovered. The island falls in hours. Same with Iki Island, token resistance, then collapse. By early June, the Eastern Army reaches Hakata Bay. The commanders expect to find the Southern Army already there or arriving shortly. Instead, they find only the Japanese and those new stone walls. The walls change everything. In 1274, the Mongols could charge onto the beaches and establish beachheads quickly. Now there are 10-foot stone barriers blocking the shoreline. The Mongols land their forces, but they can't push inland. Samurai defenders are positioned behind the walls, raining arrows down on anyone who gets close. The Mongols try to scale the walls. They're pushed back. They try to breach them. It takes time and costs lives. Days pass, then weeks. The Eastern Army is stuck. They control parts of the shoreline, but they can't break through the defensive perimeter. They're fighting from their ships, which is miserable, cramped, hot, supplies running low, disease starts spreading, dysentery, food poisoning from spoiled rations. The soldiers are demoralized. Where is the Southern Army? They were supposed to be here by now. The two fleets were supposed to overwhelm the Japanese together. Instead, the Eastern Army is fighting alone. Again, the Southern Army is delayed. Coordinating 3,500 ships is a logistical nightmare. Getting 100,000 men organized, supplied, and loaded onto vessels takes longer than planned. Many of the Southern Army soldiers are former Song Chinese. They've just been conquered by the Mongols. They don't want to be here. They're being forced to fight for their conquerors against another nation. Morale is low. Discipline is shaky. The Mongol commanders have to use harsh measures to keep the fleet together. The Southern Army finally departs southern China in late June. They're 3 weeks late, but they're coming 500 ships sailing north toward Kyushu. It's still an overwhelming force. When they arrive, the combined Mongol fleet will be unstoppable. Meanwhile, the Eastern Army continues trying to break through at Hakata. The fighting is brutal. The Japanese have learned from 1274. They don't just defend the walls, they counterattack. Small boats, swift Japanese raiding craft manned by local fishermen and samurai, attack the Mongol fleet at night. They're fast and maneuverable. They slip between the larger Mongol vessels, board ships, kill sailors, set fires, then escape before the Mongols can respond. One famous raid is led by Kono Mikari, a samurai from Shikoku. He and his men attack at night, boarding a Mongol command ship. They fight their way to the commander's cabin, kill several Mongol officers, then escape with captured banners as proof. It's the kind of individual heroism samurai crave, daring, honorable, glorious, but more importantly, it's effective. The night raids disrupt Mongol operations, destroy supplies, lower morale. The Mongols are frustrated. They have overwhelming numbers, but they can't bring that advantage to bear. They're stuck on ships, unable to maneuver, unable to deploy their cavalry effectively, constantly harassed by Japanese raiders. It's a nightmare scenario. Finally, in late June, the Southern Army arrives. The two fleets meet near Takashima, a small island just off the Kyushu coast. Together, they represent over 4,000 ships and 140,000 men. It's the largest military force ever assembled in a single location in East Asian history. The Mongol commanders are relieved. Now they can coordinate the final assault. Both armies will land simultaneously. The Japanese defenses, which held against the Eastern Army alone, won't be able to hold against 140,000 men attacking from multiple directions. Tomorrow, or the day after, once they've coordinated the plan, they'll launch the assault. Japan will fall, but the timing is terrible. It's late June, almost July. Typhoon season in the Western Pacific runs from May to November, with peak activity in August and September. The Mongols are aware of this. The commanders have been urging speed, trying to complete the invasion before the dangerous weather arrives. But the delays have pushed them right into the most dangerous period. On June 30, there's a planning meeting aboard the flagship. The commanders are arguing. Some want to attack immediately. They've been waiting too long. The men are suffering. They need to get on land and establish bases before the weather deteriorates. Others want to wait a few more days. Better to coordinate properly than rush in and repeat the mistakes of 1274. While they argue, the Japanese are watching. They see the massive fleet anchored off their coast. They know what's coming. They pray, they prepare, they wait for the final assault. July arrives. The weather is hot, humid, oppressive. The Mongol soldiers packed onto ships are miserable. Water supplies are running low. Food is spoiling in the heat. The smell below decks is overwhelming. Thousands of men, horses, inadequate sanitation. Men are getting sick. The commanders know they need to attack soon or the army will fall apart from disease and demoralization. Orders are given, prepare for the final assault. Every ship, every unit. Tomorrow, July 30, they land in force, multiple beaches, overwhelming numbers. The stone walls won't matter when 140,000 men hit them simultaneously. That night, July 30, 1281, the storm arrives. It starts as wind, strong wind from the south. Then the rain comes, heavy driving rain. Then the seas rise, waves build, first 10 feet, then 20, then 30. This isn't like the 1274 storm. This is a typhoon, a massive, violent, catastrophic typhoon. The wind reaches sustained speeds over 100 miles per hour, gusts even higher. The rain is so heavy that visibility drops to nothing. The sea is a chaos of massive waves crashing from every direction. And the fleet, 4000 ships packed together, anchored close to shore, loaded with men and supplies, is directly in its path. The ships are torn from their anchors within hours. Anchor ropes snap like thread. Vessels that had been orderly, organized under command are suddenly at the mercy of the storm. They're driven into each other, hulls splinter, masts break, ships capsize. The soldiers below deck don't have a chance. When a ship capsizes, they're trapped. The holds flood. They drown in darkness, pressed against the ceiling, now the bottom of the ship as it sinks. Those who make it to the deck face the ocean. Most can't swim. They're wearing armor. They go under within seconds. The ships that don't capsize are driven onto shore or onto rocks. They break apart. Men are thrown into the surf. The waves smash them against debris, against rocks, against each other. The beach becomes a graveyard, bodies, broken wood, drowning men being pulled under by the undertow. The typhoon rages for 2 days, July 30 and 31, then into August 1. For 48 hours, the storm tears the Mongol fleet apart. There's nothing the commanders can do, no orders to give, no tactics that work against a typhoon. They can only hold on and hope to survive. When the storm finally passes on August 2, the destruction is absolute. The Mongol fleet is gone, not damaged, not scattered, gone. The sea is covered with debris, shattered hulls, floating bodies, dead horses, supplies bobbing in the waves. The beach is littered with wreckage for miles. Conservative estimates based on Chinese and Korean records suggest 50–70% of the ships were destroyed. That means 2,000 to 3,000 ships sunk, with 140,000 men aboard, and assuming most couldn't swim, Casualty estimates range from 60,000 to 100,000 dead. It's one of the deadliest natural disasters in military history. More men died in that typhoon than in most medieval battles combined. The survivors are scattered. Some ships managed to ride out the storm and are now limping back toward Korea or China. Others are wrecked on Kyushu's shore, their crews stranded in hostile territory. Maybe 20,000 to 40,000 Mongol soldiers survived the typhoon. They're scattered, demoralized, leaderless, and surrounded by Japanese forces. The Japanese, watching from behind their walls, see the storm destroy the enemy fleet. They see the bodies washing ashore. They see Mongol soldiers stumbling onto the beach, exhausted, half-drowned, defeated, and they attack. The samurai pour out from behind the defensive walls. They hunt down survivors. Small groups of Mongol soldiers, trying to regroup, are surrounded and slaughtered. Some try to surrender. The Japanese aren't interested in prisoners, not after what the Mongols did to Tsushima and Iki in 1274. This is revenge. The killing goes on for weeks. Japanese patrols scour the coastline, finding pockets of Mongol survivors hiding in caves, in forests, in abandoned villages. Some are enslaved, most are executed. Korean and southern Chinese conscripts, who never wanted to be there, who were forced to fight for the Mongols, are sometimes spared. The Japanese recognize that these men were victims too, but Mongol officers, Mongol soldiers, they're shown no mercy. By mid-August, it's over. The remnants of the invasion force that managed to escape make it back to Korea or China. The fleet is destroyed. The army is annihilated. The second invasion has failed. Catastrophically, Kublai Khan receives the news in his capital. The largest military operation in Mongol history, the culmination of years of preparation, the deployment of resources from across his empire, all of it destroyed by a storm. Over 100,000 men dead, thousands of ships lost. And Japan is still unconquered, still defiant. Kublai is reportedly devastated. He's in his 60s now. He's spent his life conquering. He defeated the Song dynasty. He controls the largest empire on earth. And he cannot conquer one island nation. He considers a third invasion. Plans are actually drawn up in 1283, but they never materialize. The costs are too high, the logistics too difficult, the memories of the typhoon too fresh. And there are other problems: rebellions in Mongolia, wars in Southeast Asia, administrative challenges in China. Japan is not worth bankrupting the empire. The order is never given. The Mongols will never invade Japan again. For the Japanese, the interpretation is immediate and unshakable. The Kamikaze, the divine wind, saved them, not once but twice. In 1274, a storm scattered the invasion fleet. In 1281, a typhoon destroyed it. This cannot be coincidence. This is proof that Japan is protected by the gods. The kami themselves intervene to save the nation. The belief becomes central to Japanese identity. Japan is special. Japan is sacred. Foreign invaders will always fail because the gods will not allow Japan to fall. This belief persists for centuries. It shapes Japanese foreign policy, Japanese culture, Japanese self-understanding. Even into the 20th century, the kamikaze myth influences Japanese military thinking, culminating in the World War II kamikaze pilots, named after the divine wind, sacrificing themselves to protect Japan from invasion. But here's the thing: the storms were real, but they weren't miracles. They were weather. Typhoons hit that region regularly in late summer. The Mongols knew the risks. Korean advisors certainly knew Korea gets hit by typhoons too, but the Mongols invaded anyway. They delayed. The Southern Army was 3 weeks late. By the time both fleets converged, it was late June, heading into July, typhoon season. The gamble was that they could complete the invasion before a storm hit. They lost that gamble. The 1274 storm was smaller, more like a bad gale. But it hit because the Mongols were still at sea, anchored in an exposed bay, unable to retreat to safe harbor. The 1281 typhoon was catastrophic, but it struck because the Mongols were still at sea in late July, packed together, vulnerable. If the Southern Army had arrived on time, if both fleets had landed in early June as planned, If they'd overwhelmed the Japanese defenses and established land bases before Typhoons season, maybe it would have been different, but they didn't, and the storms came. And the Mongols paid the price for poor timing and bad luck. The Japanese like to say the gods saved them, and maybe, from a certain perspective, they did, but the gods had help. The samurai fought with incredible determination. The defensive walls worked. The night raids disrupted Mongol operations. The Japanese forced the Mongols to stay at sea longer than planned. They delayed them. They held them off just long enough. And when typhoon season arrived, nature finished what the samurai started. It's not really a story of divine intervention. It's a story of a determined people using every advantage, terrain, tactics, will to resist, to hold out until the environment itself became their ally. The Mongols were the greatest conquerors in history, but they couldn't conquer geography. They couldn't conquer weather. They couldn't outmaneuver a typhoon. The failure to conquer Japan is one of the great what-ifs of history. If the invasions had succeeded, if the storms hadn't come, if the timing had been better, if the Mongols had established a permanent presence in Japan, the entire course of Japanese history would have been different. The Mongols brought change wherever they conquered. They imposed administrative systems. They facilitated trade across the Silk Road. They spread technologies, ideas, cultural practices. China under Mongol rule became more cosmopolitan, more connected to Central Asia and the Middle East. Korea was integrated into the Mongol Empire and influenced by continental politics for generations. If Japan had fallen, the Mongols would have brought those same influences. Chinese and Korean administrative practices, continental Buddhism, Confucian bureaucracy. The samurai class might have been destroyed. The Mongols had little patience for warrior aristocracies that didn't submit. The imperial system might have been dismantled. Japanese culture, which developed in isolation, might have been fundamentally altered. Trade patterns would have changed. Japan would have been integrated into the Mongol trade network. Ideas and technologies would have flowed in from the mainland. The isolationist tendencies that came to define Japan in later centuries might never have developed, but that didn't happen. Japan remained independent. The invasions failed, and those failures reinforced Japanese exceptionalism. Japan was different. Japan was protected. Japan didn't need the outside world. For the next 600 years, Japan maintained strict control over foreign contact. There were periods of trade with China and Korea, brief encounters with European explorers, but overall, Japan remained isolated. The Kamikaze myth became a pillar of national identity. We are the people whom even the Mongols couldn't conquer. We are protected by the gods. And the Mongols, this was their greatest military failure. They'd conquered sedentary civilizations and nomadic tribes. They defeated armies far larger than their own. They decrossed deserts, mountains, vast distances. They adapted to fighting in forests, in cities, in terrain completely unlike the steppes where they originated. But they couldn't cross 100 miles of ocean and hold a beachhead against a determined enemy in typhoon season. It wasn't for lack of trying. The 1281 invasion was one of the most ambitious military operations in pre-modern history. 4,000 ships, 140,000 men, resources from across the empire, meticulous planning, and it all came to nothing because of 2 days of bad weather. Kublai Khan never tried again. He turned his attention elsewhere. Campaigns in Southeast Asia, against Vietnam, against Champa, against Java, some succeeded, others failed, but none were as catastrophic as Japan, and Japan remained unconquered. The Mongol Empire continued for another century, but it never again attempted a major seaborne invasion. The lesson was learned. The ocean is a more formidable barrier than any army. For Japan, the victory, if you can call surviving a typhoon a victory, had long-term consequences. The samurai class, which had fought so desperately, expected rewards. They defended the nation. They risked their lives. They'd held the line. But there was no loot, no conquered territory to distribute. The shogunate had to find ways to reward the warriors without the usual spoils of war. It led to financial strain, political tension, and eventually contributed to the weakening of the Kamakura shogunate. Within 50 years, the shogunate would collapse, partly because of the economic and political stresses created by the invasions, but in the immediate aftermath, there was relief and gratitude. Shrines were built to honor the Kamikaze, prayers of thanks were offered. The story of the divine wind was told and retold, embellished and mythologized until it became legend. And the legend endured because it was a good story, an island nation, outmatched and outnumbered, facing the greatest military power on Earth. Defeat seemed certain, and then the gods intervened. The storm came, the enemy was destroyed, Japan was saved. It's the kind of story people need to believe, especially when the alternative is acknowledging that survival sometimes comes down to luck, that timing matters, that weather can decide the fate of empires. The Mongols understood this, probably better than the Japanese. They knew they'd gambled on the weather and lost. They knew the delays had cost them. They knew if they'd moved faster, coordinated better, landed sooner, they might have conquered Japan before the storms arrived. But they didn't, and Japan survived. History has few ironies sharper than this. The Mongols, who conquered empires by moving faster than anyone else, who built their success on mobility and speed, were destroyed because they moved too slowly. The Eastern Army arrived too early and couldn't break through alone. The Southern Army arrived too late and walked into a typhoon. If they'd synchronized, if they'd attacked together in early June, the outcome might have been different. But military operations are never perfect. Logistics break down, communications fail, weather doesn't cooperate, and sometimes the enemy fights harder than expected. The Japanese didn't just sit behind their walls and wait for the storm. They made the Mongols pay for every day they stayed at sea. They delayed them. They wore them down. They held out just long enough. And when the typhoon came, it finished what the samurai started. That's the story. 2 invasions, 2 storms. One of the greatest military powers in history stopped not by another empire, not by superior tactics or overwhelming force, but by an island nation's determination and the worst weather at the worst possible time. If this story moved you, here's what I need. Hit that like button, drop a comment, tell me what you think. Should Kublai Khan have tried a 3rd time? Could the Mongols have ever conquered Japan? What would the world look like if they had? These are the questions that make history fascinating, the moments when everything hung by a thread, when luck and timing mattered as much as strategy, when nature itself decided the fate of nations. This is the kind of history they don't teach in schools. Not the sanitized version, not the oversimplified narrative, but the real story, messy, complicated, brutal, and ultimately unknowable. We can read the chronicles, we can study the sources, but we'll never know what it felt like to be a samurai watching that fleet appear on the horizon. Or a Mongol soldier trapped below deck as the ship filled with water, or Kublai Khan receiving the news that his grand invasion had been annihilated by a storm. All we have are the facts, and the facts tell us this: the Mongols tried, twice, with everything they had. And they failed. Japan survived. The Kamikaze became legend, and the Mongol Empire learned that some places are beyond conquest, not because the defenders are stronger, but because the gods, or nature, or sheer dumb luck sometimes favor the underdog. We're telling stories like this every week, battles that changed history. Invasions that failed, empires that fell, the moments when everything hung in the balance and one decision, one storm, one desperate stand changed everything. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Share this with someone who thinks the Mongols were unstoppable, because they were. And that's what makes this story so compelling. The Mongols failed, Japan survived. The divine wind, whether you believe in it or not, became one of the most powerful myths in history. And sometimes, when you're facing impossible odds, a myth is exactly what you need.